your questions to Kemi Badenoch on 0345 6060 973. WhatsApp on the same number or text 84850. No interview from me. Right from the start, it'll be you and Kemi, maybe with the odd follow-up question from me. It's the first phone-in she's done since she was elected leader, and I know she's looking forward to getting your questions live and exclusive on LBC.
On your radio, on Global Player, and
Play LBC.
leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's newsroom at 7 o'clock, a teenager has been found guilty of murdering a 15-year-old in a dispute over a teddy bear in Croydon. The jury rejected 18-year-old Hassan Santamu's claim that his autism meant he was out of control when he stabbed Eliane Andam in 2023. Her father, Michael, spoke outside the Old Bailey.
The verdict today is the first step towards justice for Eliane, but also a message that violence and knife crime, especially towards young women, will not go unanswered.
It's thought Israel's cabinet will meet tomorrow to approve a ceasefire plan with Hamas in Gaza. There's been no progress today, with Israel accusing Hamas of backtracking on the details. Sir Jeremy Greenstock used to be Britain's permanent representative at the UN. He told Tonight with Andrew Marr there doesn't seem to be much enthusiasm from Benjamin Netanyahu for the ceasefire.
I don't think he really wanted to do a Gaza deal on this timing, on this basis. And people around him in his cabinet certainly did not want to do it. They haven't yet crushed Hamas.
Jeremy Hunt was Foreign Secretary under Theresa May. He told Andrew it's vital the Israelis agree the deal for the sake of the hostages still in Gaza.
So I think the whole world, including the whole American political spectrum from left to right, is hoping that we get a deal over the line. And I think all eyes are on the Prime Minister of Israel. He's a hardliner, and hardliners are often, curiously, the people who can get these deals over the line.
The Home Secretary claims new government-backed local inquiries into grooming gangs will produce the best visible change for victims. Yvette Cooper's announced a rapid audit into gang-based sexual exploitation, telling MPs it will look at the cultural and societal drivers behind offences. Gabrielle Shaw is Chief Executive of the National Association for People Abused in Childhood. She's welcomed today's announcement and told LBC a national inquiry isn't necessary.
My view has always been, what would it achieve over and above what we already know from the Alexis J. Independent Inquiry into Child Sexual Abuse? Almost 6,500 brave individuals who stood up and gave their experiences to the Truth Project at that inquiry. If I thought a new national inquiry would add significantly to what we don't already know, I'd support it, but I don't think it will.
Rail strikes by some Avanti West Coast workers over the next 2 Sundays have been put on hold. The RMT union says it's to allow for intensive talks in the dispute over rest day working. HM Revenue and Custom workers are to strike on the last 2 days of the month in a dispute over pay. The Public and Commercial Services Union said its members employed by a private firm at HMRC will walk out in the days before the self-assessment online tax return deadline. David Lynch, the director behind the hit Twin Peaks and surrealist films like Blue Velvet and Mulholland Drive, has died at the age of 78. He announced last year he'd been diagnosed with emphysema and wouldn't be able to work anymore.
LBC Business Update.
With Who's Off, the easy way to manage staff leave and absence.
Sir Keir Starmer's admitted turning the economy around will take time after weaker than expected growth in November. It's estimated the economy grew 0.1% after falling by the same margins in both September and October. BP is cutting nearly 5,000 jobs around the world in a cost-cutting drive. The energy firm says it needs to strengthen competitiveness, improve performance and play to its distinctive capabilities. In the city, the FTSE 100 closed up 91 points at 83.92. The pound buys $1.22 and €1.19. LBC weather: rain in Scotland will edge south tonight. It will be cloudy in the south of England, a bit milder with a low of 4 degrees. Becoming brighter in Scotland tomorrow, remaining cloudy in the southeast and a high of 12 degrees. From Global's newsroom for LBC, I'm Tim Humphrey.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with Iain Dale.
Hello, a very good evening. It's 7:04 on LBC. Tonight, something different. We have an hour with the leader of the opposition, Kemi Badenoch, who joins me in the studio. Kemi, welcome.
Thank you.
And it's going to be virtually entirely callers, not normal me interviewing you and then we go to callers. But I'm just going to ask you one question at the beginning. You've made your biggest speech of 2025 so far today. It's got quite a lot of headlines. What's been your objective in that speech? What did you want to achieve from it?
I want people to know that the Conservative Party is under new leadership. We are drawing a line under the past, and we are going to be working very hard to earn the trust of the British people. We were kicked out in July. People voted whatever they could to get rid of Conservatives, Liberal Democrat, Labour, Reform, and it's because they were unhappy. So we need to address that, and we need to do the job that they've given us, being an effective opposition, helping steer the government onto the right course. But we also want to let people know that we're going to be doing things differently. We're going to be telling the truth about mistakes that we made, which we can see Labour making, almost tripling down on, but also about the scale of the problems we face. Politicians have been telling people what they want to hear, just giving announcements, no plan to deliver them. And the absence of a plan is why we are where we are today. And all the parties are doing it. Labour is doing it. That's why they've run into trouble. Reform is doing the same thing, just making announcements rather than having detailed plans.
Some people say you were a member of a cabinet that was doing that. Did you not at any point put your hand up and say, Prime Minister, I don't think we should be doing this?
Absolutely. But when you are in the cabinet...
Give me an example.
I'll give you the best example where there is evidence is on net zero. So in the debate in Parliament, 90 minutes, where we made a law that effectively would cost the country £1 trillion, according to one report. 90 minutes of debate, and everybody was congratulating everybody else. And I was one of only two people, I think the other person was a Labour MP, who said, what are we doing? How are we going to pay for this? So I did ask those questions. But I stayed in Cabinet to make sure that someone was there trying to steer the right course. Now I'm in charge. It's new leadership, and I want the party to be doing more things my way.
Right, the number to call if you'd like to put a question to Kemi Badenoch is 0345 6060 973. You can WhatsApp us on that number as well. And of course, you can watch us on Global Player. Let's go straight to Karen in Chippenham. Karen, good evening. What would you like to ask?
Hello, Iain. Good evening, Miss Badenoch.
Hello.
Regardless of which political party any of us support, I think we all agree that we need economic growth, especially with regard to paying for all our public services and infrastructure.
Yes.
So we know that Rachel Reeves is raising £40 billion in taxes, mostly on the people who can least afford it, and £30 billion through borrowing to invest. What I'd like to know, please, is how would you spend this money to both stimulate the economic growth and also support the public services, and in particular the NHS? And added to that, since the current Prime Minister plans to spend billions of pounds on artificial intelligence in the NHS, would you prioritise this spending on medical equipment, such as diagnostic equipment and MRI scans and so on, and obviously to prioritise patient care? Or would you spend the money on the business management side of the NHS, including the management of the NHS internal market, which also involves private equity and investment banks?
God, you've asked a question which could take an hour to answer there, Karen. Kemi.
Karen, thank you for your question. So I would start off by responding to the first part of your question, which is where will the money come from? How are we going to get economic growth? And what I said in my speech today, and which I will keep saying, is that it is not government that creates growth. It is business that creates growth. It is entrepreneurs, it's people who are running businesses, people who are working very hard at jobs, being productive. That's what creates growth, and we must never forget that. So anything that destroys jobs will destroy growth. And that was my problem with the budget, that there was no growth plan. It was basically just grabbing money, as you rightly identified. Now, you asked, how would I spend the money? This is one of the things that we're going to be working on. I've just been elected party leader. We are going to take the time to work up a plan. What I'm not going to do is just say, well, I'd quite like to spend money on this, so that's what we're going to do, or we should do more on diagnostics. It's the rushing and the announcements rather than doing the detailed work that has been the problem.
Because everybody's going to say, well, where's the beef?
Indeed, but there's no beef even coming from the government or from, any of the other parties. And one of the things I've said is that don't confuse announcements with policy. Announcements is what you want to do. Policy is what and how you're going to do it. So what we're going to do is set up policy commissions. We're going to be taking evidence from experts, and we're going to make sure it's all joined up. Politics has not been joined up. Health's doing one thing, education's doing another, Home Office is doing something else. We need to fix that. So rather than telling you what I personally think about diagnostic equipment, which may not be correct, I'm not a health service worker, I'm not an expert in that area. What I'm going to do is set up policy commissions, and that will be the next intervention that we make as a party.
What will be the timetable for those commissions to report and you to at some point announce some policies? Because I know you've only been leader for 10 weeks, but already you're coming under a lot of pressure from people to say, well, we've got no idea of what she stands for.
So what I have always said is that whenever a general election will be called, we will be ready long before that. We will be ready. These processes take time, but people want to hear policies because they want to be fed. And I use a restaurant analogy that we get an election once every 4 or 5 years. We all have to eat at the same restaurant. Doesn't matter who you vote for, whoever wins gets to feed. Doesn't matter what my menu is now. I need to go and work up a plan, make sure that it's ready. And when it is, people will like it. So we will set up policy commissions. They will report that some will have things earlier than others. But I would like to see things in 18 months to 2 years' time. It may take longer, may take a little bit longer, it may take a little less longer, but that's going to be dependent on what people are finding. But if you remember what I said when I was running for leader, that what we want to do is rewire the state. That's going to be a multi-year project. There will be initial policies, there will be manifestos, but we need to actually go back to first principles. What is it that we believe in? And that's where the root of policies comes from that people can buy into. What are the values we share?
But you've criticised Nigel Farage quite vociferously for not having any policies. How can you do that when you don't have any?
No, I'm not criticising him. I'm making an observation that not having policies is not an issue as long as you have principles and you show people how you are going to be getting those policies, which is what we're going to be doing.
But he has principles.
Well, he might do, but what he doesn't have
but
is...
the thing is, I think everybody knows what his principles are, whereas people aren't, because you're relatively new to the job. People don't know what yours are. And
so that's why I'm here. So at a high level, of course, we do have policies. We want lower taxes. We want to lower immigration. We said it again and again. And in my speech today, one of the things I said was that we were telling people what we wanted to do and not how we would do it. We'd only work it out later on. So people should know that we want lower taxes, we want a growing economy, we want to make sure that we bring immigration down to a level that it is not a strain on public services and where we can integrate people and have better social cohesion.
I'm sure we'll get some questions on that.
Those are our principles, and I've got more too.
I'm sure
you want to talk about them.
Right, Karen, thank you very much for that. Let's go to Khalid in Epsom Downs. Khalid, hi, what would you like to ask Kemi?
Good evening, Kemi. Happy New Year.
Good evening.
My question to you is very simple and straightforward. The grooming scandal, an act of, unashamed criminal, barbaric criminality. However, according to your narrative, the grooming scandal is all about an underclass of disenfranchised Muslim men from a predominantly Pakistani background. I feel the scandal is more widespread. However, you're just going on and on at the Muslim men from northern mill towns, okay? And, a lot of people out there on the right, talking about, multiculturalism has failed and we need to deport them. So why such a narrow-minded focus on the Muslim community?
Okay, thank you very much. This is a really important question. So first of all, what I have actually been trying to do is to stop the overgeneralization. I don't want to see people lumped in with the rapists and the groomers unfairly. And, when people use the phrase Asian grooming gangs, Muslim grooming gangs, even Pakistani grooming gangs, what I was actually saying was that this is a very, very specific community that is overrepresented. It's not about Pakistan. It's not about people from Lahore. And when you look at the backgrounds, there have been papers written about them. They are people who are actually cut off from those countries, living in regions where we brought in quite a large large number in the 60s and 70s, not even recent migrants, and they've remained closed, they've remained insular. And what we need to do is make sure, as I did when we had the Commission on Race and Ethnic Disparities, that we get right to the root of who is doing what. We mustn't run away from things. We mustn't pretend that, there isn't a particular issue in any community. Different communities have different problems. Child sexual abuse runs across multiple groups, multiple ethnicities, but the specific cases which we are talking about in Telford, in Rotherham, in Rochdale, there was a prevalence of people from that particular tiny region in Pakistan, amongst others. We've seen other groups represented as well. But if we try not to talk about it, then we create a vacuum that is filled by those people who you're talking about who don't know how to speak on these issues. You need someone who can be brave and confident, but also sensitive, and make sure that we get right to the root of the problem.
Khaled?
Well, I'd just like to ask Kemi, is that, does she agree with certain, people on the right, like Professor Matthew Goodwin, like members of the UKIP party, who talk about, a failure of multiculturalism, we should, deport these people. Because I think that's going to lead to a two-tier. I don't think that's a solution. That will lead to a two-tier society, a two-tier justice system. I mean, the UK, if it goes back, if people read their history, we are a country of immigrants going back to the Normans and the Vikings.
This is true, but the scale of migration and the sorts of people who were coming into the country are very different from what we've seen in recent years. Now, what I would say is that we need to be very careful about the language that we use. So I always talk about us being a successful multiracial society or multi-ethnic society. We are no longer a homogenous society in terms of what people look like, but we do need to have a shared culture. When you have lots of different cultures and there's no shared culture bringing everyone together, then you have problems. And the reason why I say this is because I grew up in a place that was multicultural. I was born in London, but I grew up in Nigeria. There's 300 languages, 300 different ways of doing things, lots of conflict, but everybody looks the same. And we need to make sure that we distinguish between multiculturalism and multiracialism. They're not the same thing. And there are many, many cultures that have come to the UK that are doing very, very well indeed. There's a small minority of them that are not doing well. But if there is no shared dominant culture, then you will find that there is more fragmentation. I do not want to see that, because that is when you start getting the sort of conflicts that we see in many countries that have been unsuccessful.
What about the language that is used in this debate? Because your Shadow Cabinet colleague, Robert Jenrick, you referred to alien cultures, used the word medieval as well. You yourself, in an interview this week, have talked about, and as soon as I heard you say it, I instantly thought that word is going to become a story when you described, you can tell the listeners what the context was about peasants. First of all, Robert Jenrick, why is he still in your Shadow Cabinet? Well,
the Conservative Party is a broad church. I consider Rob a friend, and we will all have disagreements. There are all sorts of things that people will say, and I think, I wouldn't quite have phrased it like that. But I understand where he is coming from. And when I, for instance, used the word peasants, I was being very specific. I'd read about the specific group of people, and their papers written, it's always peasant farming background. And one of the problems that I think that we have in this country is that when there's a difficult topic, when there is something that people feel a bit squeamish about, we immediately start thinking, you didn't say it quite the way you should have said it. It's a distraction. And as soon as we're talking about, did you say medieval? Did you say alien? Did you say multicultural or multiracial? We stop talking about the problem. It is a way for people to distract themselves.
The words have consequences. Remember the Boris Johnson niqab comments about looking like letterboxes. I had callers the day after that saying, I'm a Muslim woman, I wear a niqab, I've just been abused in the street, and it's because of the language that Boris Johnson used.
Well, of course we need to be careful about language, but we also need to be accurate. And what I always start off with is saying, is this true or false? And quite often people aren't complaining about whether something is true or untrue. It's that they don't like that word. And I think that once we get down that sort of track, we stop talking about what we really need to be talking about. We need to be talking about the victims. We need to be talking about the survivors, not whether the rapists are being described in a way that people think is appropriate. I'm not on the side of the rapists and the groomers. I don't care how they're described. I'm on the side of the women who need to get justice.
Well, just on that, Dakota in Newton Aycliffe has a question which is relevant. Dakota, thank you very much for your call. What would you like to say?
Hello. My question for you is, during your time as Minister for Women and Equalities, why did you never speak about the grooming gangs? Grooming gangs have been a massive issue for years, so why now?
Several reasons. The first is that you speak on your portfolio, and even though the title was Women and Equalities, the grooming gangs issue was a Home Office issue, and you speak on the area that you cover. And I did speak about other victims. I spoke about the children who were having irreversible medical procedures. I spoke about the women who were suffering by having men put in female prisons. I spoke about the postmasters. I overturned their convictions in Parliament. So there were other groups of people that I was talking about. And I did speak about the grooming gang scandal. I just didn't speak about it in Parliament. I spoke about it on live national TV last year. So when Keir Starmer says, she didn't speak about it in Parliament, he's playing a trick because he knows that I was not a minister in an area where I would have been able to speak about it. And this is one of the things that I think is wrong with our politics today. There's all sorts of tricks and gimmicks that mean that people like you end up being misinformed because of Punch and Judy politics. I'm not somebody who has ever run away from saying what I think is right. And I talked about it last year. Now I am in charge of our party. Now I want us to spend more time on this issue.
This has been an issue since 2011.
That's true. But I've only been a Member of Parliament since 2017. It's not an issue in my constituency. But also, remember, the Conservative Party did do something. We launched an inquiry, the independent inquiry that Alexis J chaired, and it ended up doing far more. It covered all sorts of things, what happened in the Catholic Church and so on. So it wasn't. So I thought that inquiry was going to do a lot more on rape gangs and grooming gangs. And when the recommendations came out, we saw that it hadn't. We then launched a task force. Again, the Home Office did that. Rishi Sunak as Prime Minister, Suella Braverman as Home Secretary. They found 550 perpetrators. So I didn't need to say very much because we were doing things. And if other people are doing things, then just rocking up to say, by the way, I also care about this. That's not how you do politics. Now I am in charge and now I am doing my job, which is trying to get a national inquiry. And it's very interesting to see that Labour are now U-turning. They haven't said a national inquiry, but now they've found money for more local inquiries. They wouldn't be doing that if I wasn't doing my job as opposition. And that's what I need to do. I need to put pressure on the Labour Party to do the right thing.
Dakota, are you satisfied?
Yes, thank you.
Cool. You got a happy customer there, Kemi. that doesn't happen very often on a phone, does it? Right, let's go to Robbie in Chelmsford. Hello, Robbie.
Good evening. Hi, Kemi. I'm a 30-something homeowner, run my own small business. I was previously, for a decade, a loyal Conservative voter, but I did spend my summer, I have to admit, getting Chelmsford to elect their first Liberal MP for over a century. I feel very strongly that the Tories have become way too focused on big business, the pensioner vote, and furthering their own careers, if I'm honest. Despite their flaws, I would actually sooner vote for reform right now than go back to the Tories, because at least they have a degree of vision for Britain haven't lost my trust.
Gone from Tory to Liberal Democrat to Reform?
I haven't yet, but I'm pending to be the second Lee Anderson incarnate. So yes, but my question would be, if I can boil it down, Kemi, if you're going to do things differently, like you say, what are you going to do for younger voters like me who think they don't get a fair deal in Britain today?
So thank you for your question. Was it Robbie?
Yeah.
It's always good to speak to Essex people. As an Essex MP, it pains me to hear that you did not vote Conservative because we lost my really good friend, Vicky Ford, who was a hardworking MP. But I understand why people like you were angry. And this is what my speech today was about. That we talked tough, we said a lot of things, but we didn't deliver on all our promises. And after 14 years, people thought it was time for a change. So what I need to do is make sure that I can rebuild trust. I don't think people just want to hear more promises. And I could tell you anything. We're going to do this, we're going to do that. But why would you believe me? I need to give you a reason to believe me. And what I'm going to do is be an effective opposition, just as I was saying on the call earlier, trying to get Labour to do the right thing, make it very clear who it is we are for, the people who work hard. We need to stop putting burdens on them. As business secretary, I cannot tell you how many bad things I stopped in terms of more problems coming down the line for business, especially small businesses like yours, entrepreneurs like you. And we need to do more. We need to make sure that people like you can help grow the economy, because it is business that grows the economy, not government. But that also means that we need to take the time to look at how we do this sustainably. There are a lot of structural problems that are affecting not just the UK, but the whole of the Western world. Mass migration is an obvious one, but actually demographics is one that isn't talked about enough. We are getting older, living longer, needing more support. People are having fewer children, and that means we're spending more and more money on later life. You know, you talked about us only focused on pensioners. We have more pensioners now than ever before as a share of the population. These things are going to need very, very serious thinking, and that's what we're going to do. We're going to do that hard work so that we can win voters like you back who are very disillusioned.
And Robbie, just tell Kemi, what's the one thing that could win you back to the Conservatives?
It's not very Tory, but it is more fair, and it is addressing an issue of waste, and it came up on Thomas Warbrick's programme. It is, given what you just said, Kemi, and the demographics question, which needs to be confronted, it's being serious and perhaps having some conversations about with Mel Stride, who I believe said the triple lock will become unsustainable. Now, I'm not talking about being mean to pensioners and taking away their money, because I know we don't want to do that, but there are some people that get the pension or get the triple lock applied to it who do not need it. So shouldn't we look at that and perhaps using that money to help build more houses or help young people to become homeowners?
So that's exactly the sort of thing that the policy work we're going to be doing will look at. I have always said that we don't do means testing.
We're actually going to look at the triple lock.
I know we're going to look at means testing. Means testing is something which we don't do properly here. I'm someone who always said, for example, that millionaires should not be getting the winter fuel payment. But what Rachel Reeves has done is the extreme version of that, where people who are actually on the breadline have had their winter fuel payment taken away. We don't have a system that knows who should get what. That's the sort of thing that we need to be looking at. Now, the triple lock is a policy which we supported throughout our 14 years in government. That was a Conservative policy. But we need to make sure that we are growing. Starting with the triple lock is not how to solve the problem. We need to start with, why are we not making the same kind of money we used to make? And I tell people that we started living off our inheritance. We're living off the work that previous generations did. We've got to give something to the next generation. What are we leaving them with? And that's what we've got to sort out. We can't just make ourselves comfortable now, spending their future. We need to give them a future.
Robbie, thank you very much for that. Just actually it's related to Robbie's question. Suella Braverman was sitting in that seat earlier this week doing a phone-in with Tom Swarbrick. And this is what she said.
If there is territory for agreement and coalition, I don't know what you call it or what form it takes, I do think that if there is alignment between the Conservatives and the Reform Party at the time of the next election, if it means stopping another 5 years of Labour, I would support it.
Now, you don't support any idea of an accommodation with, a merger with Reform, but Suella Braverman clearly disagrees with you. Isn't that going to be a running sore over the next few years?
No, I don't think so. And I think it's actually good to hear what my colleagues are thinking. And, you know, I encourage people to say things openly. It's a lot better than hearing things anonymously. We will not always agree on things. So I understand where she's coming from. But the fact is, Nigel Farage has said that he wants to destroy the Conservative Party. He's not interested in removing Labour. He is interested in destroying Conservatives. And that, for me, is a red line. But also, I have strong views about people doing deals and pacts before an election has even occurred. Even after an election, election, it's confusing. Look at what happened to the Liberal Democrats when they went into coalition in 2010. People want to know what they're voting for. And if they vote for something and get something else, they become really disillusioned. What we need to do is stop thinking about what Reform is doing and look at ourselves. Why are people not voting Conservative anymore? Let's focus on making ourselves the best political product, not on trying to do deals.
And that came out in a poll that LBC did with More in Common, where they found that 1 in 4 Labour voters regretted their votes. 28% of those, however, said they now favour Reform versus only 17% facing the Tories. Are you pitching enough to those disgruntled Labour voters?
Well, we have to make sure that we minimise the appetite for protest votes. I remember a time when the Liberal Democrats were where all the protest votes went. And protest votes are what happens when people don't know what your party stands for, or when they don't like what you're doing in office. We are in opposition now. We are not the government. And I believe in competition. I actually like having other parties doing things because it means that we're forced to do better. If you're trying to, gain market share, you don't spend the time thinking about merging with another product. You want to be the best product. I mean, mergers happen when when companies and parties are not doing that well. I think that we need to be the very best version of conservatism that there is.
Right, before we go to the news, let's have a slightly, well, at least I think it's tongue-in-cheek, from Ian in Windsor, who says, Kemi, after you stopped working at McDonald's, did you revert to becoming middle class, or have you remained working class?
I think I was working class for a few years after that. I think a lot of people are very sceptical that you can move in and out of classes. I think that, especially with with migration, people do actually. You get, doctors who end up working as taxi drivers. So I worked at McDonald's for about a year and a half before working in a shop. And I worked as a receptionist. I did all sorts of jobs just to pay my way through uni. And I think I stopped being, in my view, working class when I had a roof over my head that was my own, and I was earning my own money, and I wasn't worried about what I was going to eat. And that didn't happen until I first got my graduate job.
Have you been a bit surprised by some of the reaction to some of the things that you say, like that having steak for lunch, for example, that you don't like sandwiches, the whole McDonald's thing? Do you sometimes think to yourself, what world are we living in where this becomes a headline?
I think that when you are new to the scene in the way that I am, obviously I've been in politics a few years now, but being leader of the opposition means that a lot more people take a lot more interest in what you're saying. I mean, the sandwich comment, I was asked, what do you eat for lunch? Do you like sandwiches? I said, no, I don't like sandwiches. And that became a headline and a running story for about 3 days. I do think there is a lot more unseriousness in politics, but I don't take that much notice of it. I always try and look at the positive side, at the silver lining. And what I learned over Christmas, because it was a Christmas interview, so it was quite lighthearted, was that people care what I think. And so, I need to make sure that I use my voice well.
I was just waiting for the follow-up line. Yes, I have steak for lunch and I like it raw.
There's a new thing that's open called Farmer Joe's, which is interesting. They do a steak. So I need more protein in my diet. So I do like steak, yes.
Right, well, we'll get some full-fat questions in the next half an hour. Chris in Leicester is next, but let's get the news headlines first at 7:31.
Kemi Badenoch has told LBC she wants the country to know the Tory party is under new management. Speaking to Iain Dale, she said she was drawing a line on the past.
We're going to be telling the truth about mistakes that we made, which we can see Labour making, almost tripling down on, but also about the scale of the problems we face. Politicians have been telling people what they want to hear, just giving announcements, no plan to deliver them. And the absence of a plan is why we are where we are today.
It's thought the Israeli parliament will meet tomorrow to discuss the peace deal with Hamas. It's accused Hamas of backtracking on the details worked out yesterday. Eliane Andam's father says her death has left a void that her family will never fill after the 15-year-old's killer was found guilty of murder. She was stabbed by Hassan Sentemu at a bus stop in Croydon in South London in September 2023 during a meeting to return his ex's belongings. LBC weather: rain in Scotland will edge southwards tonight. It will be cloudy in the south of England, a bit milder than recently with a low of 4 degrees.
This is LBC. leading Britain's conversation. Iain Dale. Alexa, send a comment to LBC.
7:35 on LBC. Kemi Badenoch, the leader of the Conservative Party, is with us taking your calls. You can still get your call in 0345 6060 973, and of course you can watch us on Global Player. Lots of reaction coming in, Kemi. As you can imagine, it's sort of fairly split. It's, Sid says, "I'm not impressed. I really don't trust the Conservative Party," which I suppose illustrates the challenge that you were opening with. James, on the other hand, says, "I've never heard Kemi Badenoch talking at length before. She's very impressive. I like her already. She should be out there more, letting people hear and discover her. That means a lot more on this programme on LBC. I think that's why I've read it out, James. Falling into your trap." Chris is in Leicester. Hello, Chris.
Hi there, Kemi. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you.
Yeah, so I've recently turned 18 last month, and as I've grown up through the years, I've noticed that there's just a real big discontent towards the Conservative Party with young people. And I just want to ask what you want to do for us who post-uni are going to want to buy houses and move up the class ladder, because right now, how it seems, the middle class seems to be dying, and the moving up from the working class to middle class just isn't there right now.
Okay. Thank you for your question. This is an issue I really, really care about. I spoke in my speech today about intergenerational unfairness and giving the next generation their inheritance. That's the right thing to do. And I say this because I remember what it was like to be 18. And when I was 18, everything was great. This is 1998. I couldn't wait to go on and do the next thing. Everything was fun. And when I speak to young people now, they don't sound like how I think we sounded back then. I remember having one conversation and it sounded like, the climate is burning. There's not going to be a planet left for us. We're going to uni. There's so much debt. We can't buy a house. All the good jobs are being taken by other people. And feeling like there's no one who's out there for you, that there's nothing left for you, is what I want to fix. It's not going to be easy because we are going through a period of change all across the world. And these are some of the things which we're going to need to address. How do we restructure our economy so that it works for today's world, not 1980 or 1950. But we will only succeed if we do right by your generation. So I want you to be able to go to university if you want to, but not have to go to university if you don't want to. One of the worst things that's happened is people having to go to university to do jobs that they didn't need a degree for and coming out with debt. That is not fair. One of the other things that's terrible is how long you have to save up for a house deposit. We want you to have personal freedom, economic freedom. Freedom is important, and control over your life. And that means the government being really focused on making sure that you can do what you want, certainly within the law, but fulfilling your potential. We want to create opportunity. So building the right homes in the right places that are affordable, making sure that the streets are safe. I think the experience young people have now when it comes to crime or even just being attacked online constantly is awful. So I want to create just a safer and better, more prosperous place
Chris, great question.
For 18-year-olds.
Thank you.
and older.
Let's go to Karen in Kingston. Karen, hello.
Hi. Sorry, I have been listening. I've heard a lot of talk generally in reference to principles, and I think an acknowledgement of mistakes. I think you called them in public life over the last 14 years. My question really is about the substance of political debate today in our democratic society and the tenor of that debate in a background of unprecedented violence against anybody really in public life. I'm sure you're aware of this. Teachers, NHS staff, and of course, tragically, politicians. It's only 21, isn't it? October 21, that we lost David Amis from your party. 2016, Joe Cox. And councillors, politicians don't feel safe meeting the public, I understand, quite rightly these days. So, given that background, I cannot believe the complete absence of condemnation of violent rhetoric and disinformation from MPs arising from Elon Musk et al. And his comments. There's been absolutely nothing about a foreign, possibly deranged billionaire setting the not only the tone of the debate, but also the actual content of the debate. So my question to you is, as leader of the opposition, why on earth aren't we hearing from opposition MPs saying, thank you, Elon, but we will control our own political agenda and we will not tolerate this attack on our elected representatives? And I would also add that Elon Musk and anyone on the bandwagon of Rochdale, I think Elon running out.
Karen, I need to get you to get to the end of your question.
Yes, briefly, why isn't Kemi standing there, denouncing this whipping up of fervour against public servants, violent fervour?
So thank you very much for your question. I do think that we are living in a time where there's virtually no deference to politicians or anyone in public life. People are so much more angry. They're so much more visceral. You know, you look at anything that I put online and all that goes on after it is abuse. People literally are waiting. You know, you have anti-fans, not fans, people waiting to try and pull you down and tear you down. And I think the best thing you can do is lead by example. And that is what I want to do. Now, you ask why I don't condemn Elon Musk. I've seen a lot of the stuff that he's put out there. And obviously, if you are someone who he is talking about, it can be quite unpleasant. But I'm afraid that my calling people out in that way, just because I don't like what they say, is against my principle of free speech. I don't think he has called for violence. I don't think
free speech,
there are limits, but he hasn't called for violence against people.
Hang on a second, because
so we need to be very careful about what we're accusing people of.
Sure, but you're a former Minister for Women.
Yes.
Why can't you unequivocally condemn the way Elon Musk targeted Jess Phillips, calling her a rape genocide apologist? Now, Jess Phillips says women in politics suffer this kind of abuse much worse than men. Why is that so difficult to call out?
Because it's not difficult to call out. But
you haven't.
Well, Jess Phillips called other people rape genocide apologists. I didn't attack her for that either. There's only so much that I can spend my time saying, and I'm not wading into everybody's battle. I will say things when I think it's necessary for me to say them. Jess Phillips is a feisty person who spent a lot of time attacking others. She can fight her own battles. I am not interested in spending time discussing...
So you have as a fellow woman, you have no sympathy for Jess Phillips being called that?
I have sympathy for anyone who is facing abuse on social media. I don't like it. I think he was being rude and insulting. He was not calling for violence. And so where I draw the line is when people are inciting.
But by doing that, he is inciting because he's licensing other people to do the same or even worse.
I think that it is important that we make sure as politicians that we control our discourse. When a politician has been engaging in that kind of discourse, I think I believe it was George Galloway. I can't be sure. When a politician has been doing it,
you need to be sure with George Galloway because he'll sue.
Well, yes, I think.
So be careful.
I'm not. I recall seeing something on social media. I don't spend that much time on it, and someone else said that. I can't remember exactly. But if she has engaged in that kind of conversation, I'm afraid I don't feel very sympathetic. But when I do think that something needs to be called out, I do so. And I did that, for example, I remember when people were attacking, who was it, Douglas Murray, for example. I've done a whole lot of that on the issue of women, a lot of the gender-critical women who were being attacked, sometimes physically. I stood up and I spoke out for them. So I speak up for the people who need my voice. If I was speaking
up for Douglas Murray, somebody on the right of politics, controversial figure, but you won't speak up for Jess Phillips for being attacked in this way.
No, I spoke up for Rosie Duffield, who's on the left of politics. I speak up for people who I think live by that example. But if people go out attacking and abusing others and then want everybody else to wade in on their behalf, I'm sure some people will do so, but that is not a good use of my voice. That doesn't mean I want to hear more violent content. Absolutely not. Violent content. I condemn that. But part of the problem is that we are all getting obsessed about what Elon Musk said and what, reform is doing. We need to just move on from these things and start focusing on the real issues.
Do you think Elon Musk is a friend of the UK? Because Neil Kinnock has said he should be designated a national enemy.
Well, I don't think that's helping. I don't think that's helping either. We need to stop all this silly squabbling. So and so said this. We sound like children at the playground. Someone said this. I don't like it. Can we stop this person from saying this or that? Let's just cut the crap and start focusing on what matters. The world is changing. We are not competing the way we used to. The UK needs to get a grip. And I can assure you that in those countries that want to overtake us, they are not spending time worried about who said what on Twitter. They are serious countries. I want us to have serious politics, and that's the direction that I'm taking the Conservative Party. I don't want people attacking Jess Phillips, but Jess Phillips is a big girl. She can take care of herself.
If Elon Musk offered you £1 million, would you take it for the Tory party?
The Tory party is open to legitimate donations from people who believe in our mission and our principles. And I'm not going to be deciding who or who I do not want money from on the radio. I don't think that. Well, I don't. Well, the thing is, because I don't think it's serious. I think the whole thing about Elon Musk donating was a rumor that just got out of control. So I don't want to indulge in the hypotheticals, but I also don't want to put off the many people out there. It doesn't matter how much you want to give, whether it's £10 or 10 million.
And you called him out, didn't you, for his racist comments? Would you take more money from him?
Well, I said that what he said was the specific comment was racist, but I also said that people say things very flippantly. He didn't go out publicly to say it. No one heard him say it. This was a private conversation from several years previously. And I made a comment about the statement that if it was correct as I read it, yes, it was racist. But that doesn't mean that we need to start witch hunting people for every single thing that they have said. We need to make sure that we just get serious. If people apologize, we do the right thing, we accept the apology, but we shouldn't, as I said, be afraid to call something out if it's wrong.
Right, let's take a quick break and we'll take more calls. It's 7:46.
Okay.
LBC, this morning on Nick Ferrari at breakfast.
A deal has been done. Ceasefire. Israel and Hamas reach a deal to end the war and free the hostages, but in a series of phases, it has to be said. Andrew's in Halifax.
I think history has shown that all Hamas will do is just use it to smuggle weapons and launch another genocidal attack on the Jewish state.
Stephen Norwich.
I'm very cynical about this. I think that this ceasefire deal suddenly come about when Biden's about to leave.
William is in Alloa.
I think it's fairly obvious that it's Donald Trump that are responsible for this, because Trump came out and said that he wants this done before he gets in, and Netanyahu had to react.
Nick Ferrari at breakfast. Back tomorrow morning from 7. Listen on your radio and on Global Player, LBC.
It's
Iain Dale. Text 84850. This is LBC.
7:49 on LBC. Kemi Badenoch is here answering your questions. I can't believe this hour's gone so quickly. So let's get some more questions on. Shadi is in Raynham. Hello, Shadi.
Hi, good evening. Hi, Kemi.
Hello.
Hi. It's just a question for you. So we currently have, we know that the knife crime is so high right now. My question is, if you come into power, what are you going to do to sort that out?
Thank you. Knife crime is an issue which has been plaguing certainly our cities, but London in particular, for a very long time. And you are absolutely right to raise it. It needs more looking into. I believe that there are many things that need to be done to bring it down. One, making sure that we resource the police properly so that there is a deterrent effect. When people are carrying knives, they should be punished. And, everything we can do to make sure that they're not carrying the knives in the first place. I think there should be more education on the dangers in schools. But these are things that we've been doing for a while. I think that there also needs to be a serious look at who is carrying the knives, why they feel that they should be carrying them, why they don't feel safe. We need to give young people more of a feeling of safety. We need to give them a sense of belonging so that they don't feel that they need to belong to a lot of violent gangs that actually sort of promote this sort of thing. People often ask me whether we should stop music or ban music that promotes violence. I don't think that would make that much of a difference. I think that we need to look more at things like families, how we can support families so that people know what their children are doing, where their children are going, and just have a little bit more in terms of the policing of our streets. That's what I think will help. We've had, lots of suggestions, which we tried, knife amnesties. I remember when we had a lot of those arches that people had to go through. I also think that stop and search is an effective policing tool. I think it needs to be done properly and done well, and communities knowing how it's being used so it's not something that looks like it's targeting certain types of individuals or racial profiling. But all of those things combined, I think, will help bring knife crime down.
Shadi, I knew I'd say Shadi, not Shade. Thank you very much for your question there. A text question from Sammy who says, you say there was no plan for growth outside the EU. It seems the PM could face a choice soon between the EU and the US. I'm assuming you're referring to tariffs there, Sammy. Which would you choose?
I think that we don't have to choose. When we left the European Union, we left with a free trade agreement with the EU. And Donald Trump was negotiating with us on a free trade agreement with the US. It was, because I was trade secretary and I went in and I saw that we'd actually been negotiating. It was stopped by the Biden administration. So there is an opportunity to do both. And this is what I meant when I was talking in my speech about having a plan and seizing the opportunities of Brexit. People assume that Brexit was an end, a means to an end of just leaving the European Union. It should have been the beginning of a proper strategy. We should have had a proper plan to make sure that we compete effectively. So I don't think that we do have to choose, but we do have to be smarter about the way we negotiate. And that's what worries me about Keir Starmer. You look at what's been happening with the Chagos deal, you look at the negotiation with the unions, and it looks like every time he goes into a negotiation, we, the British public, are losing. Taxpayers are losing. You need savvy people who know what they want and how to get it for negotiations.
You met J.D. Vance recently
Yes.
in America. How did you get on with him? What did you make of him?
We got on very well. I quite liked him. He's 4 years younger than me. So I'm 45, I think he's 41. So we're of that generation, sort of late Gen X, early millennial. And we bonded a lot over shared experiences growing up in the 80s, worrying about our future. When we were growing up, everything seemed fine. We started off with the peace dividend that previous generations had delivered. And so there's a lot of nostalgia in my generation about how things used to be and can we make it like that again? And that's something that we had a long conversation about, and we talked about how our countries could work together. And it's basically ensuring that we have the right relationships, that we stay friends with people even when we disagree. And it's when the relationship building doesn't happen that you end up getting into funny places with whether it's with EU countries or with the US and people saying silly things about other countries' leaders, which I absolutely condemn.
Teresa has WhatsApped us and said, Kemi Badenoch has used 2 gender-critical comments so far. Why are you not questioning her on her stance in support of trans people? Because you are, Teresa. My son is a vulnerable young trans man and I fear for his safety and well-being in this type of climate. Being trans is not an ideology or movement. It is young people and adults feeling fearful of the current hate towards them.
Right. So, Teresa, I'm sorry that you feel that way, but I want you to have this reassurance and let me be absolutely clear. No one is attacking, I certainly am not attacking trans people. I think that we need to make sure that trans men and women have the security and safety and privacy to live their lives with dignity. What I do object to, and yes, I am very gender critical, is people being told wrongly that because they are gay or when they are autistic or not quite sure that they are born in the wrong body and then put down a pathway for irreversible medical procedures which they cannot change and decisions that are made before they are old enough to understand what they are doing. And I say that because I spoke to people who did go down that pathway and had regrets. I had many meetings and I don't want young people's lives to be changed in that way where they have regrets because those in authority don't give them the right support that they need. And that is my stance. But more than that, I also think that there are many people who are exploiting transgender people by using that conversation to do things they should not be doing. That is why I do not believe that male prisoners should not be housed with females. That is wrong. That is how we ended up having rapists in women's prisons because they claimed to be trans. And you shouldn't just be able to say, I'm trans, put me in a women's prison or in a women's loo. We need to have better safeguards than that. And that is what I'm fighting for. And that will make life better both for those people who are trans and those who are not.
OK, let's go to Elliot in Cheadle. Elliot, hi, what would you like to ask?
Well, very simply, can I ask Kemi exactly where her personality and characteristics have dissipated to? She was supposed, when she got into the leadership, to be a robust individual with robust views, anti-woke values, no-nonsense style, forthright. When she speaks at the dispatch box every Wednesday to the Prime Minister since she's been leader of the opposition, she comes across as a pupil who is asking the master some very delicate questions and tries to be so conciliatory. Where does all the attitude and the supposed character dissipated to?
Oh, I'm sorry you feel that way. I am still the same person. And I think Keir Starmer might disagree with you that I'm being conciliatory. I'm asking him some very difficult questions. But I think what you might be observing is the change from answering questions to asking them. It's a totally different thing. And I love answering questions. That's why I'm on this show. I know what I think and I want people to know what I think. And you will hear me answering questions in a very robust way, and I don't shy away from saying difficult things. Asking questions is a totally different thing. It is about making sure that you, the listener, understand what it is the person is doing. So Prime Minister's questions, is often Punch and Judy, but I want people to be able to interrogate the Prime Minister, not just attack him. It's not just about telling someone how awful they are, even though that's what you think.
But you do have to duff him up occasionally, don't you?
Yes.
People expect that.
Well, they do, and I do,
May I interrupt you?
Yes, of course.
You're trying to be an assertive individual. You want the public to believe in what you say. Why don't you, instead of sitting on the fence, attack the Prime Minister for what he really is, a confidence trickster? I've got literally a couple of minutes for you to answer.
Okay. Well, the thing is, there are certain things that you're not allowed to say in Parliament. There are actually rules. So you can't call people a liar. You can't say that they're disingenuous. And I also need to make sure that everything I'm saying is something that can be stood up. So it's not just about throwing out my opinions. And it is a long process. It's not just what you see every week.
I think Elliot was expecting a bit more oomph. That's what he wants.
Okay.
But do your advisors say, Kemi, you've said yourself that you can start a fight in an empty room. You've got to tone it down a bit.
Well, people have said that. So the most interesting thing about Prime Minister's questions is how everybody wants you to do it differently. So if you say A, people ask, why didn't you say B? And if you say B, they say, why didn't you say A? if you carry...
That's just your own MPs.
Yeah, indeed. Some people say, why don't you use all your 6 questions on one topic so you can really nail him? And some people say, well, why didn't you talk about all these other things that are happening? There's so much else going on. Why are you only talking about this one thing? So everybody has a different way that they'd want to do it. And I will try lots of different things. But please remember that what I'm doing is working as the leader of the opposition so that everyone out there in the country can hear the Prime Minister speak for himself. He is, in my view, the one who will actually expose himself rather than me, because it's the answers he gives that shows what sort of person he is. And at the moment, he is not answering any questions. I'm asking him questions. He can't give any answers.
We've reached that bit of the hour. You know what's coming now. It is.
Oh, no. I thought we just started.
Quick fire questions.
Oh, okay, fine,
Don't you just love those? Right, here we go. Keep supporting Ukraine or encourage a deal?
Keep supporting Ukraine.
Bring ISIS fighters back from Syria like Sebastian Gorka wants, yes or no?
No.
For a drink down the pub, would you prefer Angela Rayner or Rachel Reeves?
Definitely Angela. I actually quite like her. People think I don't, but I actually quite like her. I think she'd be fun. We just have very different politics.
What's a treat you allow your kids but probably shouldn't?
Too much screen time.
Just to keep them quiet.
Well, I'm often working at home. So yes.
Streaming has really overtaken linear TV in recent years. What are you watching?
I am dipping in and out of Yellowstone, which my husband is watching. I don't have the time, sadly, but it's so gripping that even though I'm only dipping in and out, he fills me in on what I've missed.
Well, I can highly recommend Black Doves. You'd love that.
I will watch Black Doves then.
You used to work in McDonald's. What's your favourite order? Or having worked in McDonald's, does that mean you can never go in again?
Well, yes. So when I worked there while I was at college, so I was working part-time and at college part-time, and I went there every day. And even when it wasn't my shift, I would go in, and I remember it was £3.88, and I would always get a quarter pounder with cheese. I cannot look at a quarter pounder with cheese anymore. But I still do eat at McDonald's, but only breakfast. So if I'm going to McDonald's, I'm getting a bacon and egg McMuffin. That's my favourite thing.
Okay. Dream holiday destination? Chagos, anyone?
Almost always Italy. Yes. I can't always afford it, but almost always Italy.
3 more to go. What makes you cry?
What makes me cry? Sad movies make me cry. When they get you when you're not paying attention. I remember crying for do you remember the Inside Out? These Pixar movies, Toy Story 3. Toy Story 3 got my eyes welling up as well. So it's often silly things rather than the big things.
What makes you laugh?
Almost anything.
Or who makes you laugh?
My husband makes me laugh. My husband makes me laugh a lot. A lot of my colleagues and MPs are very, very funny. So you have to find humour in politics. Otherwise, you'll be miserable.
And finally, what's the thing you most miss about Nigeria?
Probably heat. Not much, because when I look back on it, I love the people. But I did not like a lot of the experiences. So the thing I miss the most is the weather, not rainy season, but the heat. So I love sunshine, and sunshine doesn't always come with heat. So we've had these frosty days. The sunshine, even on the frosty days, is very welcome. Cloud is sad. Cloudy days are sad.
Kemi Badenoch, thank you very much indeed for joining us over the last hour. Hope you'll come back very soon to talk to more of our listeners. Now, in the next hour, I want your reaction to what you've heard from Kemi. 0345 6060 973 is the number to call. It is 3 minutes past 8.
On your radio, on Global Player, and
Play LBC.
Leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's newsroom, Kemi Badenoch told LBC it could be 2 years before she announces any policies. Speaking exclusively to Iain Dale, the Conservative leader says it's not an issue as long as you have principles and show how you're going to get them. Kemi Badenoch says she'll set up policy commissions and take evidence from experts first.
It may take longer, it may take a little bit longer, it may take a little less longer, but that's going to be dependent on what people are finding. But if you remember what I said when I was running for leader, that what we want to do is rewire the state. That's going to be a multi-year project. There will be initial policies, there will be manifestos, but we need to actually go back to first principles. What is it that we believe in?
An 18-year-old's been convicted of murdering a schoolgirl in South London in a row over a teddy bear. Hassan Sentamu stabbed